So first little thing we're going to do is just talk a little bit about what is loyalty, right? Just for some context for discussion. I think it's important to at least know what the heck we're the topic is, what we're going on with. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to stole a couple of slides. So I want to make sure that we give some credit to Adam Osler down at the bottom. You guys have a copy of the slides too. Adam is a bit of a loyalty guru in Australia, right? And he's done a report called For Love or Money. He has an entire company based around loyalty. So I don't want to say we're stealing his ideas, but we're showcasing his ideas, right? Because it gives us a good, I guess, a good little bit of context. He quite succinctly, if you like, puts together some thoughts around what loyalty is about and what it could be. So what he talks about is when you say, well, what is loyalty? What does it mean? Because everybody talks about loyalty, but there's a lot of conversation around what does loyalty mean in my business, right? Compared to another business, how does it all compare? So he says there's three main things, right? So first one is behaviors. Loyalty is behavior. The second one is belief. And the other one is belonging. And if you try and think about those, if you think about behavior, so in the world of behavior, that's when people start to think about loyalty. So I should be pretty clear. We're talking about consumers, right? So we're using the word consumers. So if you look at a consumer and you think about behaviorally what is loyalty, that's where you have a consumer who's probably involved with your brand using things like maybe buy one, get one free, or coupons, or that sort of transactional behavior where they go like, oh yeah, I'm loyal to that company because I go there all the time. And I tried to think about what was a good example of that in our world, right, in hospitality. And I think it's probably McDonald's. It probably was mine. I don't know if you'd agree.
Yeah.
I always look at Sarah when I ask these questions because she's sort of my go-to loyalty person. So I'd say McDonald's is a pretty good example, right? So you think about that. The second sort of key, if you like, is he calls it belief. And belief is when somebody really feels strongly about your business or your brand. Right? And again, in my world, I always try to think, well, what does that mean? How do I model that, or how do I relate that to my business? And I think the ones that I came up with, I did a little bit of thinking on this. I thought probably some car brands like Subaru or Porsche. Those are ones that people, and in the past I would have said Tesla, but as a Tesla owner, I think that's probably a little bit on the nose right now. But if you think about those car brands, people, especially Subaru, if you've ever met a Subaru person and not walked away thinking, maybe I should buy a Subaru. I don't know, maybe they're better than I thought. Because they become very very heartfelt about the brand. And I think in our businesses, the couple that I thought of in our world, I actually thought of, so again, not to offend anybody who's here as a different brand, but I thought of the Euro Shop, because if you're from Queensland, it's amazing how many people will tell me that I should eat something at the Euro Shop, right? And they do make a latte food, but it's an interesting sort of perception locally about it. And the other one I thought maybe El Jannah, because if you're in Sydney, there are people who will evangelize about El Jannah. So, oh yeah, have you eaten El Jannah? You have to try it, especially if you're not from the West. And I know they've expanded a lot, right? So now it's becoming more common. But I know, especially in the early days, like, I don't know how long, they've been around a long time, but let's say 10 years ago, if you talked about El Jannah, it was like a well-kept secret in the West that, you'd be tempted to go out and try it out and stuff. So I think those are the sorts of brands that have this thing around belief, right? Around that brand is special to me and I want to share it with you. Yeah, if I hit that one? That was okay?
Yeah.
And then the third one is belonging. Now, belonging is an interesting one, right? Because if you think about that is, well, how do I get people to feel like they're almost part of my brand, right? They really belong to, they're in the same club or something. And honestly, the first thing that I thought of with that, because it's a tricky one, is probably, and I know we're in the middle of Sydney, so it's a bit weird, but it's actually the AFL clubs. And I thought if you're from Melbourne or if you follow AFL, they have an interesting concept, which is quite different, very Australian, right? So I'm Canadian originally, so here in Canada, I go and watch or follow an ice hockey team. The Vancouver Canucks might be my team, but it just means that I watch them on TV and I might buy tickets to their games. I'm not part of the club. I like that team. I follow that team. But if I'm like from a Melbourne perspective, if I'm an Essendon member, hold on, now I'm a member. That's my team. that, I watch them run around. Those are my guys, or my girls, or whatever. They're the people that I identify with, and it becomes part of my identity. And if you think about that from a marketing perspective, they've done a ridiculously good job at digging into people's mindsets, right? And I thought the only other two that I could think of around this that were closer to hospitality was probably, it's a very Victorian thing, but actually that's not true. Richie's Supermarkets. So those guys have done a really interesting job of getting their loyalty and tying it into community benefits. So as you buy stuff at their supermarkets, you can direct a little bit of your purchase to your charity of choice. So they sort of make you feel like you're part of their little world. And the only other one I thought was maybe Zambrero, only because Zambrero is quite big on, buy a meal from us and you're buying a meal for the underprivileged. And they actually keep on their walls, they keep the thing about this is how many meals we've purchased for other people. And again, it's really difficult. So if you think about those as the three chunks of loyalty, right? The three things that you're thinking of as well. Behavior. No, I'm not going to talk too long. Sorry, guys. I'll go a little quicker. So talk about behavior, talk about belief, and this belonging, right? And how do I mix those together and sort of get what makes sense out of those three?
Great.
That's probably challenge number one. I think I've only got two. I got two more slides. The second bit that Adam talks about is what is loyalty. I thought this was also probably the other part that's really useful, right? If you think about when you're building this, whatever your concept of loyalty is, and you're trying to figure out how do I identify or latch onto these consumers. He measures three things, which I thought was really interesting. And the question for this thing, he calls it an index that he builds, but what he actually says is, what is most important to you as a consumer? Right? So it doesn't mean, I think every consumer would find all three of these things important. But his three concepts are being simple, being personal, or being valuable. Right? And he asked in this pretty big survey that he's done, he said, so what's the most important single thing? If you had to pick one. So about 70% of people that they surveyed in Australia said, actually value is really important. I really want value. Right? So I want to feel like if I'm going to be bothered participating, I get something back, whatever that is. Now value might be perceived value, it might be going to make you gold or platinum, whatever it is, but I want some value. The second thing which I thought was interesting was that simplicity was about just over 25%. So basically people are saying, I really need to understand how to use this or how to participate. Don't make it too hard. If it's too hard, I'm going to struggle to participate. And I don't know about you, but I've seen this a lot mostly in my partner, where she just goes, I can't be bothered with that. That's not going to happen. If you give her a simple coupon, she'll use it or an offer. But if you get into a lot of kind of points and things, she's not going to use it whatsoever. I always think in these cases it's important for all of us to think you're probably not normal, right? So if you're thinking about how that's going to work, it's always great to bounce that off of normal people who don't care about our jobs, right? Because those people will tell you really, they'll go, like, my other half's an osteopath. She goes, I don't care about those things. They're not important to me. So she's great to talk to about them because she doesn't care about them. So it's a nice, sounding board. The third thing is actually making it personal. And interesting, only 7% put that as at the top. The question I would have is, well, is that because we haven't done a good job at setting that up and being really personal, right? Is that why they kind of got, it's probably not the top of my list. So what I'm saying is, have we made it too complicated and maybe not had enough value so they haven't got to the point where they can really go, I just need it to be personalized? So it's an interesting, again, it's just a framework for how we think about all this, right?
Good. No.
I promise I'll leave time for you guys. So I've got two really quick slides. The two quick slides. So this is a bit Redcat-y, right? But I looked at it and I said, well, what is loyalty? When we're talking about loyalty, what does it mean, right? So in our world, especially in hospitality, when you're thinking about loyalty, you're probably thinking about things like tiers, maybe, right? So bronze, silver, gold, just giving people some level of recognition. Often it's just gift cards. So especially in the more restaurants-y you could, we've talked to lots and lots of restaurants, have lots of restaurant customers, that to them, loyalty is literally just gift cards. That's because they don't want to, they're not going to go to their customers and try and give them points or something. They just say, oh, well, we just sell them gift cards and then they come back. It's lovely, right? So loyalty can be as simple as you want it to be, or quite complex. It just depends what you're trying to build and what you're trying to do. It can incorporate things like coupons and offers, earning and burning points, different levels of recognition, maybe some cash back. Money can't buy point redemptions is an interesting one. So things like with Nando's, you can earn a bunch of points and then go onto a special website and get like a baseball cap or whatever, right? That you can't pay money for. You have to buy it with points and that sort of stuff. So loyalty is what you define it as and what your consumer sees value in. And that's not an easy question, right? That's actually quite a tricky game to play. And then the other thing I thought was actually useful was just to talk a little bit about the fact that you fundamentally, whatever, in our world especially, whatever you decide loyalty needs to be or what your offer is going to be, you just got to make sure that you can get it to the customer, right? Because what's really frustrating, and my favorite example of this one is I often talk about if you look at in a typical retail world, and I can guarantee all of us have experienced this, you'll buy a gift card, for example, and they'll say, oh, here's your gift card. Listen, you can use it up at the on sale, but you can't use it online. Or you can use it online, but don't take it into the shop. It doesn't work. So if you want to fail quickly, right, make sure that your loyalty doesn't work everywhere. Because it will just frustrate the crap out of people. Go back to simple, a couple pages back. You just got to make it easy to use wherever the consumer wants. And remember, the consumer they don't care about your business anywhere near the way you do, right? So you want them to feel valued and feel recognized and all the good things really easily, regardless of how they're dealing with you. And then the last thing I was going to say before I handed the mic over, I was just going to say in terms of experiences and what we've learned from around the world and from others, right? Two quick examples that I thought were really intriguing. So we've done a lot of work in the UK in the last couple of years, and there's probably two things that I've seen that are a little different that have been valuable learnings still. One was the guys at, I don't know if you guys know Pret et Manger, right? So usually just called Pret. So Pret et Manger just means ready to eat, right, in English. So, which is an interesting thing to do in the middle of Britain where they don't speak a lot of French. But for whatever reason, Pret et Manger, right? So Pret is a grab-and-go style hospitality venue. And what they've done, or what they've experimented with probably over the last year and a half or so, is they did a subscription model, right? And so what would happen? So these are busy shops, to give you some idea. In the middle of London, so London, pretty good sized city, but I think there are 300? I think there's 300 Prets in London. So if you stand and you can see a Pret, it's unlikely that you can't spin around and see a second Pret. So you can never use Pret to give directions to anybody. Like you can't say, I'll meet you with the Pret because they'll be at the wrong Pret. Like they're freaking everywhere, right? And these guys decided that it would be very clever or something interesting to do a subscription model. So what you do is you buy this subscription, this membership. You pay. They changed it a bunch of times over the year and a half as they're playing with it. But you basically pay a flat fee, and for that flat fee, a few pounds, you could go and get a certain number of coffees at no cost every day, right? Now, just again, because we're in Australia, it's really shit coffee, right? So just to be really clear, it's not really a great reward, but you're in England, everybody feels like it's pretty good coffee, let's do it. So you go in, and you think, I'm going to get a coffee at Pret because there's 300 of them, they're all around me, this is going to be great. But what you find, like once they did this and started rolling it out, what you find is that now all of us, as non-subscription people, can't buy coffee at Pret because every queue is full of people getting free coffee. So I'm not even going to bother going now because I don't subscribe. I can't be bothered waiting through the queue to get to the front to order my coffee because it's too busy, and therefore I'm not going to buy any food here either. So they found that it was like a win-lose sort of problem, right? Where they were getting a lot of people coming in and getting their kind of free coffee that they paid for, but struggling a lot to sell food or to have other people go in because it discouraged normal people from walking in off the street. So anyway, really interesting learnings, right? Like, so it's pros and cons. The other one that I thought was interesting, and I gotta say, we had lots of customers who said, oh, we love this idea of subscriptions, but as everybody watched what was happening at Pret, there's been a lot of people around the entire world who've gone, maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe there's a way to, some other way of doing this. The other one that's interesting that you see in the UK a lot is there's two big coffee groups, Costa and I can't think of the other one. But and both of them are remarkably similar, right, in terms of the quality of the coffee and what you're going to get. One of them actually implemented a card-based loyalty solution, and what's been really interesting to look at from the outside. What it means is that you go into your app with them, you connect your credit card, right? And so from that point forward, whenever you go in and just tap and pay for your coffee, it automatically credits you like a stamp card. It automatically credits that you've been there. And then one day you'll go in and go to pay, and they'll say, "Oh, sorry, this one's free." So it's kind of like automated loyalty from their perspective, which is quite cool. So and consumers love it, right? Consumers love it. They go, "It's so good, it's easy, I don't have to worry about it." There's some interesting discussions to have as to whether whether the coffee company gets value out of that, right? Are you now hooking those people to your loyalty, so that's great? Or are you not interacting with them very much because you never talk to them about it and they just happen to walk away? So they don't read emails, they're hard to communicate with, right? But really interesting to see, and having a multi-hundred location shop that's kind of doing that en masse. It's been pretty good. Okay, that's all I was going to say. Just those 2 minutes. Just to be fair, nobody told me how many minutes I had. Unfortunately, I'm very good at using a lot of minutes.